So this is interesting. And it's more interesting than even the stuff that I've written about it indicates, in part because when you write, you have word limits and you can't really explore all the nuances. But there's an interesting aspect to this lawsuit that I haven't really heard anybody talk about much, but we're going to talk about it. So the basic outline here is not the factual outline here is not really in dispute. So what you have is a situation where Florida is passing HB 1557, which is colloquially known as the Don't Say Gay bill, but I hate to call it that because the bill doesn't say don't say gay. That's that's like a partisan talking point. It's called the Parents' Rights and Education Act. And when the bill was being debated, Disney was put under a lot of pressure, both to talk and to not talk. There are activists both within and outside of Disney who are saying, you need to step up here, Disney. You need to, assert your lobbying strength to defeat this bill. There are others who are saying, just stay out of it. It's, not your business. This is K through 12 education. It's not tourism. Stay out of it. And so Disney jumps in, but kind of half-heartedly. It's interesting. I went back when I wrote a piece on this and for the Times I went back to look at the contemporary commentary around the Disney's quote intervention here. And the left was really after Disney. Like, that's all you got. That's all you're going to do. So Disney CEO called the governor. Disney put out a public statement saying that it was in opposition to the bill. It was really kind of tepid stuff, not a real big deal. But DeSantis went pretty ballistic, and in no uncertain terms, declared Disney out of bounds for opposing his bill. My favorite quote is when it talks about DeSantis says Disney crossed the line. And he promised to make sure, quote, make sure we're fighting back. And he accused Disney of pledging a frontal assault on a duly enacted law of the state of Florida. Ooh, a frontal assault on a duly enacted law? Like, what does that even mean? Guess what? We all have the ability to oppose duly enacted laws or to protest duly enacted laws. I mean, come on. But anyway, and so what Disney did, or what Florida did is enacted legislation that was going to dissolve something called the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Now, this is a special taxing district that allowed the major landowner in the improvement district, which was Disney, to essentially run its own, not really its own, because the Reedy Creek Improvement District was a part of the government of Florida, but essentially run the body and appoint the members of the body that ran the area, the land area on which Disney sits. And so initially what Florida did was it got rid of this Reedy Creek Improvement District. However, the problem with that is you can't really just dissolve it with no consequence because the Reedy Creek Improvement District held a lot of bond debt. So like $1 billion or so of bond debt, which if it's dissolved, then that bond debt falls to not Disney, but other Florida taxpayers. So that was never going to be a solution. So what DeSantis did was reconstitute a new district, rename it something like the Central Florida Tourism, whatever, and put a bunch of sort of his cronies on it. Well, when this announcement was made, all you had to do was sort of go to the cronies' Twitter feeds, and you saw that they were vowing to watchdog Disney's content, that this was going to be a new government board that was then going to be watchdogging Disney's content and then making development decisions based on whether they were pleased with Disney's content. Okay, well, that's got a lot of problems right there. So Disney's looking at this and they say, well, here's what we're going to do. Before this new board comes in, we're going to essentially go ahead and execute these long-term land use contracts that, Sarah, you and I have already talked about, the rule against perpetuities, tying the contracts to the last surviving heir of King Charles plus 21 years. So they, quote unquote, pull a fast one, except they did it in plain view with notice, lawful notice according to state law. So then in comes, after the long-term contracts are executed, the new political appointees declare all these contracts void. So these long-term contracts are declared void. And then here comes Disney filing suit, alleging contracts clause violations, takings clause, due process, First Amendment, etc. That's the factual background. Now, here's the thing, Sarah, and I'll stop filibustering after this, that is the interesting aspect to me. So if you go back and you look at sort of the initial evidence trail, it is all over the place that both the governor and legislators were saying as loudly and often as they could that we are taking this action to punish Disney. We're taking the action to punish Disney. Now, there's been a lot of commentary over whether or not that kind of declaration of intent or purpose when it comes to legislation is going to be enough to create a cause of action for retaliation. But what was interesting, and Eugene Volokh pointed this out all the way when this original conflict kicked off, is that what DeSantis actually did, though, was not so much taken action against Disney as he dissolved another governmental body. This is the Reedy Creek Improvement District. And is it actually the case that Disney would possess a First Amendment cause of action if Florida just dissolves another political subdivision of Florida? Which is a really interesting legal question and could be one reason why Disney didn't initially file suit. Because if you're going to be extremely legalistic about things, which legal cases are nothing if not extremely legalistic, then is it the case that what Florida actually did as a concrete matter wasn't against Disney, but against this other governmental body? So this is what Eugene Volokh raised. Very interesting question. Very interesting. But then as this played out, and Disney and the Reedy Creek Improvement District executed their long-term contracts, in the zeal to take on Disney, the DeSantis and this new board essentially remove that defense, because what they do is not just dissolve and reconstitute a government body, the Reedy Creek Improvement District. They then take specific actions to void contracts entered into between the government body and Disney, thereby taking direct action against Disney and removing that defense that all that was done in reality was just one government body regulating another one. So that's a lot, but that's sort of setting this up. And it still leaves sort of, even if you realize that now there has been direct action taking against Disney and not just the Reedy Creek Improvement District, that's still going to leave open there's still going to be the question as to, can you look at legislation and say that legislation is retaliatory? How much are you going to be able to peel back and look at the motives of legislators, even if they've expressed it honestly, and the motives of the governor? That's going to be part of this litigation. But that's the setup, Sarah.